We're back! Disventure Camp All-Stars. If you've been here a while, you might know that DCAS and I have some history together. And if you're new here, then you should know that DCAS and I have some history together. I started making weekly videos about this season about halfway through, and in the process, it slowly drove me to the brink of sanity. But that was over a year ago, and a lot has changed since then. I am older, I am wiser, and my blood is a lot cooler, so I think I can give this cast the proper analysis they deserve, and that I never have to think about them ever again. So upon rewatching the season, I will admit, I thought it was better than my first viewing, but it's still not good. It went from being worse than Total Drama All-Stars to about on par with it, and if you think that's too harsh a comparison, I think the fact that DCAS is comparable to any season of Total Drama is one of the biggest compliments it deserves. But if I were to make a tier list of every Total Drama fan season I've ever seen, this one would probably rank around the middle. Compare it to this, and it looks bad, but compare it to this, and suddenly it might as well be Shakespeare. Because here's the thing, on a technical level, I think DCAS really excels. I think the animation, voice acting, and the general production value are still really good. It's just the writing that drags this season down. So today, I'll be giving my potentially my final overview of these characters, and with that, we can finally close this chapter of my channel's history. Two things to keep in mind before we get started though. Number one, I will be ranking these characters from best to worst because I think it would be more suspenseful that way. Secondly, because this is everyone's second season, and Emily, for a lot of these characters I will be drawing from their debut season for my analysis. But at the end of the day, everyone's placement on this list will be determined by how much I like them in this season. We clear on that? Okay, good. Video time! I have at least one writing problem with nearly every character in this cast. The worst characters are so poorly written that I think they necessitated a full rewrite, and even the more tolerable characters still could have been done better. Despite that, there's still one character from this cast who I can look at and say, hey, I am perfectly happy with the way you were written. Which is really unfortunate considering that character is James. James is my favorite character in both seasons, and I understand that's probably a hot take, but you know what, it's my list. But the problem with that, at least for me, is that he went from the best placing contestant in Season 2 to the worst placing contestant in All-Stars. And funnily enough, because I chose to cover everyone from best to worst, his placement in this video kinda mirrors that, but I digress. I've always really liked James. Badalt's voice for him is so distinct and so funny, he steals every scene he's in. So truthfully speaking, I mostly like him in this season for the same reasons I did in Season 2. For the most part, it's just more of the same James affair. One thing I really gotta give him credit for is how he kept giving Jake a hard time even after most everyone else forgave him. I feel like most of the cast let him off the hook way too easily. I'm not huge on how enthusiastic he was for Jake to win in the finale, but given that he was competing against Rhea, I choose to believe James is more so cheering against Rhea and less for Jake. Outside of that, his only other relevant dynamic is with Yul. It only takes root in about 2 episodes, but despite how few scenes they have together, I really enjoyed all of them. Even if James isn't the main character of these scenes, I think they highlight how he's become a better person since Season 2. James wasn't a terrible human being in Season 2, but he wasn't a great person either. The fact that he worked with and got along with Yul despite how nasty he was really showed that. And before I move on, yes, I know James has a few scenes in DC2 that present him in a very negative light. I am choosing to accept those as remnants of Karazar's terrible writing, and I'm going to be ignoring them for the purpose of this analysis. Those scenes don't reflect the version of James we have now, and they'll probably be removed in the remake, so why bother with them? It's not the point of this video anyway. Anyway, as James interacts with Yul in All-Stars, it's clear that James has learned from Season 2, improved as a person, and is much happier because of that. It might not be revolutionary storytelling, he was the first boot after all, but seeing how well James is doing after Season 2, I gotta say, it makes makes me feel really happy for him. And I really like that he tried to extend that olive branch to Yul, because James knows what it's like to be the outcast. So he wants to be for Yul what Rosa was for him in season 2. Obviously Yul doesn't want to change, so this doesn't work out, but I'll talk about that a little bit more during his section. Overall, while James has a fairly small role in this season, he's still James, and any scene with James is a good one. And it's nice to see how far he's come since season 2. I understand why he had to be the first boot, but Dalt is a relatively famous telenovela actor, and scheduling just got in the way. I don't think a draft was ever made for this, and if it was, it definitely wasn't made public, but I was told that prior to this scheduling issue, there were plans to let James go further in the season. He was always slated to be a pre-merge boot, but I wouldn't have minded a few more episodes with him. The only problem I have with James is that he's easily my favorite character in the season, which is good for him, but considering he's the first boot, that does not bode well for everyone else.
Let us commence forth. British?
There are 2 characters I've decided to put in the S tier. James was my overall favorite, but I think this second character is objectively better and, in my opinion, the best written character in the season. So with that being said, let's talk about the character who should have won Disventure Camp All-Stars, which is Grett. Back when the season was still releasing episodes, Grett was the one character that most people agreed was written well, and I agree with that. Off the bat, she has one of the most unique new storylines of any character, entering the season in a relationship with Yul of all people. In season 1, Grett was both plus-sized and a woman, and already the internet is unnecessarily cruel towards people in those demographics. Her bullying Gabby probably did not help. So I think the fact that she's gotten together with Yul in an attempt to repair her reputation is both interesting and a very depressing piece of social commentary when you think about it. There's a lot that could go wrong with tackling an abusive relationship plot, but all things considered, I think ONC did a pretty good job here. Grett definitely feels different, and initially I wasn't a big fan of how drastically her personality shifted between seasons. But then I thought about it, and she's still reeling from an online harassment campaign, and she's in a relationship with a guy who verbally abuses her. Of course she'd be a lot more reserved. Her self-esteem is at an all-time low. And with that revelation in mind, I've started to appreciate Grett in the pre-merge a lot more. Initially, I held the belief that Grett's arc was very backloaded, and that she didn't really get to shine until Yul left. And while I do think Grett's best character moments come after Yul's elimination, I've come to realize how important these earlier scenes are in her overall character arc. This is a woman who spent her entire life being ignored, mistreated, and demeaned, and it's so clear to me now that Grett's antagonistic persona in season 1 was a defense mechanism to keep herself safe from all that ridicule and harassment. So seeing her find the courage to act as her authentic self is very inspiring. But it's also incredibly saddening to see that the one guy who's supposed to support her no matter what is using her insecurities against her for his own benefit. It's a slow burn, but I think her clapback against Yul in episode 13 makes it all worth it. I wasn't huge on this scene initially, but admittedly that was more to do with Gabby, who we'll get to later. On rewatch though, it's incredibly satisfying to watch Grett stand up for herself and feed Yul to the dinosaur. And the way she sasses him after the fact, that is queen shit. As stated earlier though, I think she really shines after episode 13. I don't think the strategy of Disventure Camp is usually all that interesting, but I really enjoyed watching Grett play the game. I like how she scorned Alec and Rhea for using her as a vote and not stepping in while Yul was mistreating her. I also like how she played the middle, cutting deals with basically everyone left in the game to try and get what she wanted. The actual episodes where she's like this are not good in my opinion, the last one especially, but none of that is Grett's fault. She's great in those episodes. The only notable problem I have with Grett is the same problem that most everyone else has, in the sense that I do not like her elimination at all. Given everything that Grett had to go through to get to this point and how much she grew as a person, having her unceremoniously booted in 5th place really does not sit well with me, especially considering who outplaced her. Other than that though, yeah, Grett is probably the best example of writing in the season, and I really appreciate her story. Her doing a pull-up is probably the best scene in the whole season.
Dr. Trayaurus, what are you doing? Well, I told you not to be homophobic today.
We are now on to the characters that I would consider A tier. These are characters who are admittedly not perfect, but I enjoyed watching them, and I think they left a strong positive impact on the season. To start us off, okay, considering we already talked about his 2 closest dynamics, we might as well get Yul out of the way now. The last time I analyzed Yule's character was in my review of DCast 19, and the response to that video taught me a very valuable lesson about media literacy, in the sense that there are so many people in the Disventure Camp fandom that do not have it. So let me make a few things absolutely crystal clear before I begin. I do not condone bigotry of any kind. Likewise, I do not condone any form of abuse akin to what Yule did to Grett. I am a trans woman. I have experienced both of these things, and I would not wish that on anyone. Yule placed third on this list because I like him as a character and as a villain, not as a person. So if anyone out there is making the claim that Lech Gang defended Yule's actions, please politely explain to them that they are mistaken and maybe direct them to this video. That being said, that video was mostly unscripted and I didn't fully explain myself as well as I could have. So if you took issue with my original analysis of Yule, then I hope that this section will explain my thoughts a little bit better. Yule is a scumbag piece of shit, and I hate him, but I also love him. He's clearly intended to be the comedic villain, less competent than the serious antagonist, but still malicious enough to be a threat in the right circumstances. And I think he excels in that role. He's got this annoying charisma about him that makes almost everything that comes out of his mouth either endearing or very funny. Yule's brand of comedy isn't for everyone. I understand that. I think quite a few of his jokes fall flat myself, but I think Yule is at his funniest when he just says something wild and out of pocket.
You don't have to pretend to be awful around me. It's a character, right?
No. Being nice is the character, and it's fucking miserable. It's like putting your feelings up for prostitution.
The jokes themselves are whatever, but the way Yule delivers these jokes with his exaggerated whiny voice is what makes it work for me. That being said, however, there were instances where they took it too far. For those of you who don't know, the Spanish dub of DCast 11 came under fire because it featured a racial slur. From what I remember, Yule's Spanish VA improvised the slur, and for some reason it was kept in. I understand why some writers might think it's okay to have their bigoted characters use slurs, but 99% of the time it is not. A movie like Django Unchained makes use of racial slurs because it has to. It gives a very authentic and unflattering look at the time period and the negative attitudes that came with it. But Disventure Camp is an animated YouTube series aimed at primarily teenagers. There is no reason why a slur should ever appear on this show, and I sincerely hope nothing like this ever happens again. This actually ties into my next point, because to a degree, I think the writers relied a little too much on Yule's bigotry as a source of characterization. Season 2 Yule was not a very complicated character, but he could at least pretend to be nice to people and come up with some decent strategy. And while he was a bigot, those comments didn't completely define his character. Again, I still like him for what he is, but we don't really get a nuanced look at his character until episode 19. I touched on his relationship with James earlier, and I think their scenes do a great job at showing Yule's mentality throughout the competition. He's not a good person, and he doesn't seem interested in becoming one, but despite that, I'm still curious to know how he ended up this way. Based on what he says in the episode, his abrasive personality has helped him in the past, but we don't really know how or what he's referring to. At one point, he tells James that he doesn't care what others think of him, but when James asks if he's really okay with being alone, it's clear by his facial expression that Yule is not. And while his planned apology to Grett was probably 99% for the sake of his reputation more than anything else, I think that part of his motivation was to avoid being outcasted. Judging by how he brags to them at the end of the episode, he clearly thinks that Hunter and are still his friends, so why not explore that? For all of these reasons, I think that Yule is the most interesting character in the cast, because there's so much to analyze, speculate on, and talk about in regards to his character. Am I looking too deeply into this? Almost definitely, but this character setup is clearly something that ONC noticed, since they made it a big storyline within the season. Problem is, instead of giving it to Yule, they gave it to Rhea, who completely fucked it up, but I'll get to her later. Before we move on, I want to bring up the grill scene from episode 19, because this was a big point of contention when I first spoke about it, so I'd like to clear things up. I think Grett getting some physical karma on Yule is absolutely fine, and more than deserved given what he put her through. What bothered me at the time was that she intentionally tripped him, gave him a serious burn on his face, and then laughed about it. Now, if anyone in this cast deserved an injury like that, it would be Rhea. It would be Yule. But I think a grill burn is a little too gruesome just on principle, and I would have been upset regardless of who it happened to. Looking back, I think my anger in the original video was a bit overblown, especially knowing that the scar would be gone by the next episode. But I think at the time, Disventure Camp made it hard to tell how seriously we should have taken certain injuries, which is a problem they've thankfully improved upon since then. Yule is a terrible person, and I hate everything that he stands for, but he brings some much needed comedy into the season, and he has a lot of interesting character elements that I like to analyze. I think Yule had the potential to be a stellar villain, but as is, I'm still happy with the character that we got.
I'm Wilfred Brimley, and I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about diabetes.
While all three of these characters did improve on a rewatch, I always considered them some of the best in the season. I do not have the tier list I made right after I finished Decast for the first time, but I'm fairly positive that Yule, Grett, and James were all in the top 5. But fourth on this list is someone who I was initially very mixed on, and to this day, I think a lot of the fandom has issues with how this character was handled. He might not be perfect, but I would be remiss if I didn't give Connor his flowers. Yes, James, Yule, and Connor all made top 4 on the 2 separate ranking videos that they were a part of. They've always been really solid, I guess. I was sad to see Connor leave so early in DC2 because I felt he had a really interesting storyline and a lot of potential. So when I saw that ONC was bringing him back for All-Stars, I was really excited to see the old man back in action. Connor was easily the biggest wildcard in the cast because by all accounts, he wasn't an All-Star. He was eliminated in episode 3 of DC2 and placed within the bottom 3 overall. And unlike Ashley, who almost immediately integrated herself into the cast, from the moment the teams formed, Connor felt like he didn't quite belong. I like how they put the lowest status member of the cast on a team with 4 villains and a previous winner. I think that's a nice way to continue his theme of not quite fitting in from season 2 without just redoing his arc. There's a lot they could have done with that, but no, instead he gets eliminated at the end of episode 6, which is a decision. I will offer a fix for this elimination when I get to the character who should have gone out here, but for now, I don't think Connor getting booted here really accomplishes anything. For me, and for a lot of others, the only response we had to this elimination was, oh, okay, so Connor's going to rejoin the game at the merge, which did eventually happen. Thankfully. But there are some drafts of the season where that doesn't happen and he just leaves the show for good. Thank God we did not get that. I think Connor's first elimination is the turning point where Decast starts to get bad, and I've always stood by this. Episodes 7 through 10 are absolutely miserable, each with their own problems that we'll get into later. And the season didn't start to recover from that until Connor came back. As I said earlier, when the rejoin came about, everyone expected that Connor would be the one to return. He and were the only real candidates, and when she threw in the towel, it was pretty obvious what was gonna happen. I've said this several times before, but the one thing I really hated about the late pre-merged portion of Decast was all the constant arguing between the contestants. Characters arguing isn't in itself a bad thing, but Decast wrote these arguments very poorly, to the point where it felt less like engaging drama and more like a Lio Convoy stream. But thankfully, the moment Connor returned to the game, he shut that shit down. Unfortunately, he couldn't fix all of my issues in one scene. But I think the scene where he brings the heroes together is suitably dramatic, and it had me interested to see what would happen next. More than that though, I think this scene leads very strongly into episode 14, and the conversation between him and Jake at the docks. The twist of Connor being a nepo baby who never actually accomplished anything for himself is one that I feel really works for his character. I know that not everyone is a fan of this reveal, but I really like it because it recontextualizes Connor's behavior both this season and in season 2. If you think about it, he's always been overcompensating like this. He tried to fit in with others and earn their approval while also trying to prove to himself that he's capable enough to do something on his own. Prove to himself and to prove to Rhea. I don't love the arc between Connor and Rhea this season, but at the very least I think Connor's side of the story is actually pretty compelling depending on how you look at it. Rhea was the only person who really supported Connor back in season 2 and gave him the encouragement to put himself out there, but come All-Stars, she's essentially thrown him to the side in order to get a leg up in the competition. I don't doubt that Connor has genuine feelings for Rhea, but I think a lot of his attempts to prove himself to her stem from his own issues with self-worth. And for that reason, I think for Connor, getting validation from Rhea would have been enough for him to be happy with himself. But as the episodes go on, Rhea continuously treats him worse and worse, and with the help of the other contestants, Connor comes to realize that he didn't need Rhea to validate him, and that he doesn't need to support her if she doesn't respect him. I don't think anyone suggested this, but for these reasons, I think he should have had a dynamic with Grett. Even if Connor and Rhea weren't in an official relationship, I think he and Grett have common ground when it comes to being mistreated by someone who should be supporting them. They rarely spoke, but I enjoyed whenever these two shared a scene together. I think they'd be a much more interesting pair than Connor and Jake anyway. During my initial viewing, I never hated Connor like a lot of other people did, but he did start to wear on me over time. Even on rewatch, I think the cycle of Rhea taunting Connor and him snapping back at her does start to get repetitive after a while. And I think that some of those scenes probably could have been cut or retooled into something more interesting. Again, giving him a scene with Grett might have been nice, but giving more focus to his dynamic with Alec also could have helped. But I think the repetitive nature of his storyline is probably my biggest complaint. I do like how it starts, and it doesn't completely fall off near the end. I understand why some people still don't like Connor, but for me personally, I have a real soft spot for the old-timer, and I'm glad that rewatching the season let me develop a better opinion of him. If you want a deeper examination of Connor's character, I recommend this video by Cardi-Sun. I don't agree with all of the points in this video, but I think it does a good job covering Connor as a character, and I recommend giving it a look if you are interested. For now though, we are moving on.
So cool.
I hope I was positive enough for the first part of this video because that's going to wane a little bit starting with this section. This is the B tier, characters that I think are well-rounded and generally enjoyable, but have a few more flaws than the 4 characters I just listed. I was struggling between 2 characters for a while, so 5th place was hard to decide, but ultimately, I feel that Hunter deserved this spot more. I don't have too much to say about Hunter since he wasn't in the season for that long, but I think he leaves a pretty good impression while he's there. Going into the season, Hunter was a fairly controversial character given his writing in Season 2. For those of you who don't know, the original writer for Season 2, Karazar, admitted that Hunter was basically his self-insert. There's a lot that could be said about Karazar and how he royally screwed up Season 2, but for the sake of this video, all you need to know is that he's a piece of shit and that people didn't like Hunter because of him. But come All Stars, I was very pleasantly surprised by his new personality. He has enough similarities with his Season 2 counterpart to feel like the same character, but enough added personality to make him interesting. I like that the other characters actually get upset with him for some of the things he does. In Season 2, Hunter was cool and good at challenges, but he wasn't really a person in the same way that everyone else was. Probably because Karazar is a hack. In All Stars though, Hunter's dynamics with Ellie and Fiore really push him into the limelight. Starting with Fiore, I think this side plot is really funny. It makes total sense that the guy most known for his challenge ability is upset that his team got stuck with a little girl. And Fiore's high energy makes these two a perfect comedic duo. I love that Hunter has actual beef with a child, and Ellie has to directly tell him to cut it out or it's going to cost them her vote. It makes sense from Hunter's perspective, but it's also a personal flaw, which is something that characters need to be compelling. I also think his relationship with Ellie is a lot more compelling here than it was in Season 2, but that one probably went without saying. That's not to say that their relationship is expertly written or anything. I think some of their scenes are a bit too heavy-handed, but I do get what they're going for. This is definitely more Ellie's plotline than Hunter's, but I like his role in her storyline. Ellie is still stressing about how the fans perceive her, and despite his best efforts, Hunter feels like he isn't good enough to support her. I think a lot of people who have been in relationships can relate to that. Knowing that your partner is struggling but being unable to fix their problems. It's a really awful feeling, and I feel for Hunter in these scenes. I only put him in B tier because, again, I don't love all the scenes with him and Ellie, and I feel like the idea worked a lot better on paper than it did in execution. And while he does have a lot of positives, his role in the season is still very small, and he's obviously no James, so I can't give him too much credit. I think Hunter was given such a small role in this season because Karazar's writing really soured everyone on the character, which is a shame because I'm genuinely invested in this version of Hunter, and I think he could have been a fun addition to the cast if he made it further. As is though, I think he's pretty cool, and I'm excited to see what they do with him when the Season 2 remake comes out.
Oh, this is my favorite character.
So, fun fact, in my DC1 video, Ellie was 6th from the bottom, and in this video, she's 6th from the top. But because I'm covering everyone from best to worst, she's also technically 6th from the bottom again. So she's in the same spot again, technically. That's also 666. Ellie must be Satan. Okay, but for real, I happen to know a lot of people who really like Ellie, like people who think she's a 10 out of 10 character and the best part of the whole show. But for me personally,
I don't get it.
I've never been Ellie's biggest fan, but now that I've had some time to think it over, I think All Stars is the better interpretation of her character. My biggest issue with Ellie has always been her treatment of Jake in Season 1. I spent a great deal of time talking about this in my DC1 review, so if you're curious, I would go watch that video. But essentially, while I understand that they tried to paint Ellie as very desperate given her financial situation, I think her knowingly using Jake's trauma against him and thereby ruining his relationship with Tom for the sake of the game was a bit too callous for my liking. And initially, I didn't like her in All Stars because I felt like they doubled down on that catty, mean girl persona. But in retrospect, I think I prefer her that way, because the narrative acknowledges how spiteful she is and showcases her accordingly. Unlike DC1, where I believe the intention was to portray her as an anti-hero, in All Stars she's a straight-up villain. All roads on the Cyan team led back to her, and I thought it was fun to watch her gameplay in action. And I think the Lake boot is really engaging because of her. Ellie throwing Lake under the bus because she isn't a reliable vote is both petty yet perfectly understandable given Ellie's position, and she has several moments that are like this. I really like how she coerced Tom and Aiden into kissing for the episode 6 performance just to get under Jake's skin. That's so catty and I love it. This is the kind of pettiness that I like. Embracing the darker side of Ellie's character makes her a lot more fun to watch. Her role within the Villains Alliance is really small and honestly doesn't amount to anything, which I think is a bit of a waste. I can definitely think of at least one character who she could have swapped with. Other than that, I think my favorite thing about Ellie is her dynamic with I don't know, I think these two just have very natural chemistry with each other. They're both good foils for one another because conceptually I think they're very similar characters. Both because they're initially presented as very chill, low energy, cool girls who are definitely goth adjacent but not quite there, and also because of the gender envy I feel for both of them. I don't think I have a detailed way to explain what I like about their interactions, they just feel very natural to me. Like, out of every pairing in DCast, these two feel the most realistic to me, and I like that. If the writing quality was consistent all the way through, I would have loved to see a whole season about these two, but that would require DCast to have a good elimination order, so I guess I'm out of luck. I definitely think Ellie had more to offer beyond, like, what, 7th boot? She's not the biggest example of wasted potential in the cast, but I feel like All Stars definitely failed to use Ellie to her fullest because I think they had something here. As she is, Ellie is a pretty good character this season, but very underutilized. I fully believe that she could have been one of the best characters in the season if Odd Nations just bothered to use her, but as is, she's going to settle for 6th on this list.
I am a child! I am a tiny child!
All things considered, I think Fiore had a pretty good showing this season. Obviously, she was never going to do well given her reputation from season 1, but for someone who placed within the bottom 5 of the season, I thought she was fun. As mentioned previously, I think her rivalry with Hunter is very funny and contributed to some interesting drama on the Magenta team. I really liked watching Fiore try to navigate her team from the underdog position. Even if she failed to merge, I think it was impressive how she managed to survive 2 eliminations from such a disadvantage. It was a good way to write her off without dumbing her down or derailing her in some way. I like how she used Jake's paranoia against him. She's supposed to be evil, so I think something like that is in line for her. And I do like that she sent the Magenta team into disarray even after she left. The quality of the Magenta team post Fiore is another matter, but that is by no means her fault. And, yeah, that's about all she does. Don't get me wrong, I like all of these things, but nothing that she does this season is going to reach the same heights as James's Walrus impression, if you get what I'm saying. She's good, but not great, and I think a lot of people will agree with me on that. Because I remember when the return challenge was happening, there were a large number of people who really wanted Fiore to come back. I even briefly touched on it during my Disventure Camp Hot Takes video. People were upset that she didn't return, and while I'm glad that Connor was the one to rejoin, I'm not going to pretend like I don't know what that's about. I think it's less a case of, oh, Fiore has to return because she'll add so much to the rest of this season, and more a case of, Fiore has to return so she can get closure with Alec. And that is a very unfortunate product of Season 1 not doing its fucking job right. If DC1 Episode 12 bothered to give Alec and Fiore a proper resolution, then no one would have had to deal with all this headache. I know a lot of people were really excited to watch All-Stars just to see these two reconcile, and then they barely got any focus until like the last 3 episodes of the season. A lot of people have said that this is why they're going to be in fans versus favorites, as a redemption for this plotline. I've actually heard the redemption argument for a few characters. My counter argument is that if they got it right the first or even second time, they wouldn't need redemption. So I do know why people wanted Fiore to come back, but like, outside of wrapping up things with Alec, what would she even do? I mean, I like Fiore, don't get me wrong, but I feel like she'd just be eliminated not long after returning, and that'd feel like a waste to me. I can think of several different scenarios with entirely different elimination orders and merge casts, and Fiore doesn't fit in any of them. I'd even go so far as to say that, aside from Miriam, Fiore had the least reason to return out of all the candidates. There's definitely more story to be told with her, and I'm sure you'll get to see that come Season 5, but in the case of this tier list, she's going to round out the B tier.
If I can't win the prize, I'll play this last reprise.
C tier time! We're not in the deep end yet, but we're getting close. This is very much the no strong feelings tier. I don't think any of these characters are boring per se, but compared to everyone above them, I feel like they're lacking a lot of interesting traits, and as such, I have the least to say about them. So to the surprise of absolutely nobody, this is where Aiden is going. Veister is an incredible VA. I've had the pleasure of working with him before, he's a tremendous actor, and he brings characters to life in such a fun way. He's also got an incredible singing voice, I guess because he's one of God's favorites. Now, with that being said, I have a question for all the Aiden fans watching this video, and this is a rhetorical question, you don't have to type out a response, just think about it. Consider how Aiden is written this season. If he was voiced by some other guy who is not Veister, would you still like him as much as you do? If you responded with some variation of yes, then I'm impressed that you had the courage to lie to me. But also, stop lying to me. There are definitely ways to make Aiden interesting. I think the Season 2 remake will probably cover that, but as far as D-Cast goes, he's really not pulling his weight. The setup is there. His 2 closest friends were the first 2 boots of the season. There's a lot that could be done with that. But he's quickly thrown into the trenches with Tom and Jake, and within that plot, he feels less like an active participant and more like an accessory used to perpetuate drama. His dynamic with Jake mostly consists of mindless bickering up until episode 12, where we finally get to see some interesting developments. But by that point, Tom is already on his way out, so... I hated the constant fighting between Jake and Aiden early on, and while most of my problems stemmed from Jake, I wasn't exactly rooting super hard for Aiden either. But I do like that they genuinely made amends. Aiden always came across to me as a really genuine guy, so I'm glad he decided not to hold any unnecessary grudges. His friendship with Tom is... okay, they have some good scenes together, but it low-key feels really underbaked. The most interesting thing about this duo is that apparently in earlier drafts, Tom was meant to have a crush on Aiden, which I'm glad they scrapped because that definitely would not have worked for the story they wanted to tell. And that's really about it. Once Ellie becomes Jake's new rival, Aiden drifts further and further into the background until he gets unceremoniously booted 7th. And speaking of, wow, his elimination is not handled well at all. Why is Aiden the least important character in his own elimination episode? Writing decisions like this make characters feel less like characters and more like props made to push the story along. And I hate to say it, but as far as All-Stars is concerned, that's what Aiden feels like. I don't imagine he'll do super well in fans versus favorites, but I have no idea what's going on at Odd Nation, so it could be anything. Aiden's not bad, but he's not interesting, and he doesn't provide anything meaningful to the season, hence why I've placed him here.
I put the jam into Germany!
Hi, Lake.
I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about diabetes.
Hi, Miriam.
You are worse than Hitler.
Hi. Okay, I genuinely thought about leaving Lake and Miriam's sections at that, but I feel like I owe them at least some form of analysis. But I'm going to cover them together because I doubt this section will be very long regardless. I didn't expect these two to blow me away on rewatch considering they're the 2nd and 3rd boot respectively, but that didn't stop other characters from ranking higher, so I think this is fair. I think Lake's elimination is fun, and probably my favorite from the season, but I don't like it because of Lake, I like it because of Ellie and... I could say that Lake works perfectly well as the 2nd boot, but that's not exactly a great feat of character writing, so I don't know how much credit I can give her. The most interesting thing about her is that she was actually planned to be the returnee in some of the earlier drafts of the season. And I just gotta wonder, What was she going to do? I imagine that whatever they had planned for her is going to be recycled into DC5, which I think is the right call. All-Stars had enough going on as is, and Lake just didn't need to make it any further. With Miriam, the fact that she almost got cut from the season should tell you that she was always meant for a small role. She has a few funny scenes in episode 3, but obviously her most notable role in the season is helping to expose the Villains Alliance. I know that not everyone is big on her doing this, but like, given that she's on a team with 4 of them, I think she could have figured them out on her own just by how cliquey they are. But obviously, the reason they made it a big thing was so she'd also find out about Ellie and Fiore, who barely engage with this alliance at all, so kind of a moot point writing-wise. I don't mind this for her, but it's clear to me that her inclusion on this team is just to set up everyone else, so nothing too impressive. Hilariously enough though, there was an earlier draft of the season where Miriam was intended to return alongside Connor. And I just gotta wonder, what was she going to do? Now, some of you might be confused as to why characters like James and Hunter are so high while Lake and Miriam are around the middle, and don't worry, I have my reasons. James might have been the first boot, but he has one of the most defined funny personalities of the cast, while Lake is a lot more low-key. I think the reason why so many people liked her in season 2 was because we got to spend a lot of time with her, learning about her struggles, which is obviously something we can't do in All-Stars. And while both Hunter and Miriam contribute to important plotlines, Hunter's effect on Allie is present for as long as she's in the game, whereas Miriam's contributions to the seasons only last a few episodes, so it feels less impactful. These two are perfectly fine early boots, and I'm going to leave it at that.
I'm going to kill you?
For those of you who might be curious, yes, I am including the hosts on this list. The fact that none of them have shown up yet should tell you what I think of them. I excluded Oliver because he barely exists, Marcus because he's boring, and Nina because I refuse to dignify her existence within this series. So that leaves us with Crystal, Trevor, Derek, and Emily, and we're going to round out the C tier with the only host that I find even ironically enjoyable. So just barely, Emily makes it to C tier.
Wait for it, I did that.
I don't have too much to say on her, I don't love her writing or even like it all that much, but Emily has something going on that I don't completely hate, which is a damn impressive accomplishment considering this season. I was expecting her to be really annoying once the season started, but I found her surprisingly likable. I don't think her involvement with the Yule plot was totally necessary. I feel like her inclusion was a bit tacked on just so she'd have something to do before getting fired, but she didn't make it worse, so that's something. Most of her scenes come after her firing when she joins the ongoing host plot, and she's easily the best part of this plot for reasons that Jared definitely did not intend. I love how she has better chemistry with Trevor than the guy we're actually supposed to want him to get together with. And I also love how Jared definitely realized that halfway through, and in order to get everyone off the Tremoli train, he just made her go fucking crazy. It's not exactly good writing, but it's kind of funny when you think about it that way. And it's even funnier when you consider that Derek is still worse for Trevor despite Emily throwing him off a cliff. She's clearly being set up to take over the show after season 4, which I do think is a good fit for her. But we will talk about that a little bit more when we get to Derek and Trevor. I am mostly ambivalent towards Emily in All-Stars, and I don't have enough negative feelings to put her any lower, so yeah, C tier. Okay, editing Lech Gang here. I've made the executive decision to add a little bit more commentary to Emily's section because it's like really short. So how many of you are aware that Emily and Miriam share a VA? Listening to their voices back to back, which is what I did in this rankings video, I can kind of tell that it is the same person, but like prior to that, whoa. Unrelated, but why was Emily the one staff character who didn't get her own episode for Staff Stories? Like, not a single person on the planet was like, oh hey, I want a full episode dedicated to Marcus and Nina, but I guarantee you there were people who wanted to know more about Emily. Big fumble on the part of Odd Nations, I would think. D tier. Everyone from here on out is a character that I feel negatively towards. Half of the cast is in this tier or lower, in case you somehow forgot that I don't like this season. First on the chopping block was someone who almost made it to C tier, but got moved down at the last second. Because here's the thing, even though I think Ashley's writing is about on par with everyone else in C tier, I just can't get past what they did with her. I want to know what the hell was gonna happen in the timeline where she wins, because I assume in that season she'd be written written as an actual character, and not as Ashley Maria. I have no clue what compelled ONC to move her down in favor of Jake, but after thoroughly analyzing most aspects of the season, I'm gonna say that was the wrong call. Jared made it a pretty big point to say that the reason Dan didn't get brought back for All-Stars was because he was boring and he just would have been first boot fodder, which I do think is a fair enough argument, but then why bring back the girl who got outplaced by Dan in season 1 if you're just gonna use her for this? If they needed a character to be Jake's bestie, they could have just used Rosa, or hell, they could have used Miriam. It's not like she's doing all that much anyway. This really bothers me because Connor proved that a Dark Horse character could do well in an All-Star season and have an interesting storyline to go with that. And Ashley was clearly geared up to have that, but they cut it for Jake. Fucking Jake! This is such a waste of a character. You didn't even have to do all that much. She's a cute blonde girl with a cowgirl hat. It would take almost no effort to make people like her. She just needed something beyond being Jake and Allie's babysitter. And they very nearly gave her that. There's a scene where she confides in Jake about her past that I want to discuss real quick. Ashley tells Jake about a time where she threw a party at her farm. Things got out of hand and a fire quickly began to spread. A bunch of crops were incinerated and a lot of animals died, and despite how quick this scene goes by, it actually tells us a lot about Ashley. My personal headcanon is that Ashley was a really crazy party girl, but adopted a much more serious / responsible attitude as a result of the fire. If the season played into that, you could maybe tell a story about Ashley learning to move past the fire, learning to cut loose and have fun again. Then maybe we could get some scenes where she goes absolutely hog wild in one of the challenges. I think something like that would have been really fun. But no, we're really bringing Ashley back to Disventure Camp just so she can be a support character, huh? How positively thrilling. I do think her elimination is handled well. It doesn't feel like it's set up just to shock the audience. There is some proper thought behind it, and it feels both reasonable and impactful. Ashley going out does set up Jake and Allie for future developments, which would have been cool if I didn't hate Jake and Allie. And generally speaking, if they were going to stick with Ashley Maria as their primary characterization for her, I'm grateful that she left when she did. But I would have preferred she be an actual character, especially since the pieces were there. ONC just decided to sweep them under the rug for some reason, which I think is a big shame. All of this makes me wonder why they even bothered bringing her back. It's not like there was a gender imbalance, the cast already favors the women to begin with. The only thing that somewhat makes me okay with this arrangement is the knowledge that Chris Dolly got a paycheck for her work. And Crystal, if by chance you're watching this video, if I ever implied at any point in time that your voice acting wasn't good enough, you have my deepest apologies. The one consistently good thing about Ashley across both seasons is her voice acting, and I will stand by that. I just wish Ashley's writing for both of those seasons was good enough to live up to the performance. I think a lot of characters got worse between their season of origin and All-Stars, as evidenced by how many characters we still have to go through. And while there are worse examples of this, for one character in particular, I feel like they just completely lost sight of what made the first incarnation work so well. Alec is ostensibly the same human being he was in season 1, just with all of his worst traits cranked up to 11. Season 1 had this care-to-the-wind type of charisma, but he was indisputably a villain, and he frequently broke allegiances and used unsavory tactics to get farther in the game. He wasn't the nicest guy at camp, but he was able to make some genuine connections with the people around him, and clearly valued someone like Ellie as more than just an ally. But come All-Stars, he feels like a 5 o'clock shadow of his former self. He's still strategic, he's still sarcastic, and he still has his unlikely friendships, but they don't resonate with me like they did in season 1. And I feel like we can attribute that to Alec being generally less pleasant in All-Stars, which does seem to be by design. This is Alec currently going through the process of a divorce, and I think his temperament does make sense given that setup. More than that, I think this is a decent way to continue his story from season 1 in a believable way. But the execution really doesn't do the setup justice. He starts off fairly well, forming an interesting friendship with Connor and spearheading the Villains Alliance. But both of these things are diminished by Connor's first elimination. After Connor leaves, Alec is relegated to the role of Ria's sidekick, a plotline that is both very unpleasant and a profound waste of Alec's character. They are not a fun duo, and I cannot get behind the idea that they like each other even as friends, let alone romantically. But if that's not your fancy, Alec does get other scenes to pass the time, such as in episode 9 where he casually admits to neglecting his son, which is probably supposed to be a moment of black comedy, but All-Stars really wants to be taken seriously. seriously, so I gotta take this scene seriously as well. He does get a little better once Connor returns, but that doesn't really fix his problems. I'm mainly referring to the moment in episode 15 where we learn that he apparently doesn't love his son.
Of course I love my son. Oh, that's bullshit.
I do not know what the intention behind that decision was or what it was meant to accomplish, but the only two reasons that could justify Alex saying this would be comedy, which is evidently not the case because they play it completely straight, and maybe if they wanted Alec to have a major heel turn, this could have been a good way to go about that. But given how much emphasis they place on his relationship with Connor and how much guilt he felt after betraying his trust, that's definitely not what they were going for either. I don't want to say that these two moments are the only reason why I put him this low, but they're the easiest examples to reference when talking about how pathetic Alec's character became. He's just a miserable divorced dad who gets strung along by Rhea until he gets unceremoniously booted at the final 6. And for a guy who was so enjoyable in season 1 and genuinely pretty good near the start of the season, this is just a really lame way to send him off. Credit where it's due though, I think episode 19 and onwards does mark a good change for him. He feels more in line with his old self, and I like that he and Fiore were able to see eye to eye despite the... Why did I write my script like this? This is... what the fuck? I don't think Alec is an awful character, but he's definitely taken a step down since season 1, and I hope that DC5 will set him back on track.
Boys love
Mr. Krabs.
And Vivzy Pop.
And Mr. Beast!
The fact that these three characters are in D tier is honestly the highest compliment I can give to them, and I'm still not fully sure that they deserve that. I'm covering Derek, Trevor, and Crystal together because honestly I don't think they deserve their own sections. Collectively, they are the host plot, and they're each as unnecessary and annoying as each other. Choosing which one I dislike the least is nigh on impossible, so I'm going to start with Crystal just because I have the least to say about her. I won't lie, All Stars is a very big step up for her character, but given how she started in season 2, that means basically nothing. I do not care for her interactions with Marcus, Oliver, and the puppet because these three characters barely matter. I chose not to put them on the tier list for a reason. I think they tried writing her as an overworked cool girl based on her interactions with Derek, which I don't hate, but it's not enough to make me invested in her story. I just can't divorce Crystal from season 2, and the lack of any new interesting content really solidifies that for me. I think she and Derek have some level of chemistry, which is something, I guess, but at the same time, it's Derek! He's better off here than he is in season 1, but he's still Derek Johnson, so I don't care. I could talk about how his acting is marginally better, but then I'd have to compliment Stephen Gordon, and I'd really rather not do that, so I won't. Depending on the episode, Derek can be almost tolerable sometimes. He's a pretty good background character. But alas, sometimes the episode will choose to focus on him, and I'm suddenly forced to remember how much I do not like him. I think he and Crystal were genuinely a better match than him and Trevor, but obviously this is the Yaoi show, so that was never gonna happen. Speaking of Trevor, he is a mess. The main reason why Trevor's plot doesn't work for me is that I'm supposed to want him to get back together with Derek, and I simply cannot believe that any human being of sound mind and body could ever be attracted to Derek. Trevor, why do you desire intimacy with Temu Chris McClane? Look around you, bro. On one hand, you've got a beautiful, sassy redhead who's always willing to support you, and on the other, you've got Derek. This is not a hard choice. Like Aiden, I think Trevor is really hard carried by his VA, and more than that, I think Derek was also hard carried by Trevor's VA, but Silly Billy can only do so much. DC4 did a lot to remind me that Trevor McGregor is indeed a terrible human being who is responsible for mass deforestation and a lot of animal abuse. So with that in mind, when I see Trevor crying on a stump after watching Crystal and Derek make out, I'm not exactly sympathetic to his plight. It is a genuine feat of writing to make two couples with decent chemistry, break them up, and then shove one half of each pair together despite their obvious lack of chemistry. Could you imagine if Tremely and Chris Derek were queer couples and Trevik was straight, the kind of blowback ONC would have gotten? Oh my god. I think this plot just goes to show that Odd Nations is not great at writing host characters. So far, Emily is shaping up to be the best of the bunch, and hopefully that momentum carries into season 5, because I do not want her to end up like these three. I've written about 3 pages of analysis for this trio, which is honestly more than any of them deserve, so how about we move on? I went back and forth on these next two characters for quite a while, which is interesting because I dislike them for different reasons. In the end, I decided to go for the character who I think is more poorly written, but who I personally think is more tolerable. Hey there, Tom. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. I do technically have an analysis of Tom on my channel, but it was unscripted, my audio quality was horrendous, and I made myself sound like Mr. Enter for some reason. So I'm going for a more structured approach this time. I will be using some of my points from that video, but I have a few more points to bring to the discussion as well. So with all that being said, let's talk about how DCast royally screwed up Tom. Tom is easily the most pathetic character in the season, and considering everything I said about Alec, that should really put things into perspective. Now, Tom's reception post All-Stars was somewhat mixed, and I think the fandom is generally split on him as a result. The biggest complaint I've seen about Tom is that he's unnaturally stupid, and it drags down his character. And in response to that, people have said that Tom has always been this stupid, but he appears worse in All-Stars because he's letting loose, no longer dealing with the agency breathing down his neck. And I agree with this, but I've since come to the conclusion that this was never the problem. I believe that Tom's falloff in All-Stars isn't due to his lack of intelligence, it's due to his lack of competency. Season 1 Tom was not smart, but he was pretty good at doing things. Strategy-wise, he didn't have much going for him, but he was very resourceful and was a pretty strong asset in most of the challenges. It's not much, but him thinking to cut Ellie's arm off during the zombie apocalypse challenge was pretty smart, even if ultimately it didn't pan out. He was also emotionally intelligent, and I think this is most evident in episode 5. After Jake learns about his grandma, Tom immediately steps in to comfort him. And come challenge time, he sets everything straight with his team so that Jake can get an easier role for the challenge. That way, Jake doesn't have to go running around for worms while he's, you know, grieving. And most notably, I think this is a detail that a lot of people forget, Season 1 Tom was very well spoken when he needed to be. Despite having to keep a lot of things secret from him, during his more serious conversations with Jake, Tom is very direct with him. He very carefully explains to Jake how his actions upset him, how he felt about it, and why he feels that way, and I think these are some of the best scenes in Season 1 for that reason. So, resourcefulness, emotional intelligence, and communication. These are all the traits that define Tom in Season 1, and it's why he's my favorite character from that season. And the reason why I dislike All-Stars Tom so strongly is because he barely holds on to any of these traits, if at all. His resourcefulness is probably the trait that sticks the most because, after all, during the pre-merge, Tom is the one gathering food and making traps. He was portrayed as the team's provider, and without him, I think the rest would have starved. And I don't think this is a bad role to put him in, but it feels a lot less interesting than the way he tackled challenges in Season 1. He's still good in challenges, but like, in Season 1, it felt like watching a secret agent tackling these total drama-inspired challenges. In All-Stars, it feels like watching a generic beefcake tackle these challenges. The former was just more fun to watch. And even then, despite being portrayed as the biggest survivalist on the cast, he, for some reason, doesn't have the forethought to double knot his stick during the episode 12 tiebreaker, and loses to Gabby. Say what you will about him always being dumb, but given everything I just said, I feel like he should have been smart enough to do that. As for his emotional intelligence and communication skills, those two traits have basically been scrubbed away. In fact, he actually spends a lot of time lashing out at people, especially during the pre-merge. Some of which I do kinda get. If I saw Ellie roasting me on TV, I'd be a little pissed with her too. But there are a few instances where he's a lot more brash than he really needs to be. For example, episode 4, he condescends Jake for pushing Aiden over during the challenge, which is irritating because A, it was a contact challenge, B, Aiden was closer to the sandbag, and C, Tom tripped Grett earlier in the challenge for the same reason. I do not see what the problem is. But I think the biggest example of how Tom faltered as a character is just the Jake plot as a whole. Look at this scene from the end of Season 1.
I'm glad you're okay, Tom. Sorry, I just thought you didn't want to talk to me.
It's okay. I think everything happens for a reason.
What do you mean?
We were both fools, Jake. I know I was harsh with you, and the truth is, I'm not innocent in this. We both acted impulsively, we made mistakes, but I don't regret it. You helped me learn from those mistakes.
Will you still talk to me?
I think we should take some time and grow as people. We are on the right path, but starting anything could ruin that. We'll see where we are later on.
I agree. No matter what, I'm glad I met you, Tom.
Same here, Jake.
It's a really nice scene. Tom acknowledges that he and Jake both made mistakes during their relationship and that they need some time apart to grow as people. But he still clearly cares about Jake and wants to leave the door open on their relationship. Compare that to this scene.
Right now? I've got a party of 5 expecting rotisserie squirrel in half an hour. Why don't we schedule this for...
You always wanted me to talk to you before I jump to conclusions, right? Well, here I am, talking to you. Take me seriously, please. Do you like Aiden?
Huh? Where did this come from?
You kissed?
Oh, that? Jake, I thought you know better. That was for the challenge. Me and Aiden are just friends.
Then why do you keep avoiding me? Why did you keep ghosting me all these years? Tom, I know it's been years, but I've still got these feelings. I never stopped liking you, and if you're open, I was wondering...
I have a boyfriend.
What?
Yeah. I've been dating him for months.
I hope you're happy with this guy, because you deserve the best.
Wow, thanks, Jake. That really means a lot. Now, sorry. I gotta be Elmer Fudd right now, and my traps are hungry. We'll talk again soon. But I have to go.
Yeah, I cut around the scene a little bit because otherwise it would have been too long, but I think you see the problem. And if you don't, then allow me to explain it to you. Yeah, so right off the bat, rather than explaining himself like he would have in Season 1, Tom decides to beat around the question, before eventually lying to Jake about having a boyfriend. Not only that, but he completely dismisses Jake's paranoia regarding the kiss in Episode 6. Which, prior to that point, I do think Jake's paranoia was relatively unfounded, but given how paranoid he knows Jake to be, I think Tom could have responded with a lot more tact. Now, you might be inclined to argue that Tom only did all this because he was hurt from Jake's betrayal in Season 1, and that he couldn't have known how deeply this would affect Jake. First of all, that didn't stop this conversation from happening in the finale. And second of all, if there is any subject that Thomas Reed should be very knowledgeable about, it is Jake. The worst part about this scene is that the first half of Tom Jake Episode 1 canonically takes place before it. And spoilers for those of you who haven't seen it, skip to the time code on screen, you're really not missing much. Tom listened in on Jake as he was on a phone call with Miriam right after his parents kicked him out. He heard how distraught Jake was and how desperately he wanted Tom to reach out to him. How he very clearly needed some kind of closure for him to move on. And Tom has the gall to pull this shit? I could maybe understand the intent behind this scene if Tom had fully moved on from Jake and had no desire to rekindle their relationship. But no! Episode 19 makes it crystal clear that he still has feelings for Jake, and by the end of the season, they get back together. So he was still into Jake the entire time. And he still decides to give Jake the runaround, despite knowing full well how much he's been suffering and how paranoid he is. That's not stupidity, that's callousness. Oh, but Tom is really awkward and he was scared that he'd get hurt again. Shut the fuck up! That has never stopped him before. A lot of people believe that both versions of Tom are essentially the same character. And this big long rant included all the reasons why I don't believe that. Yes, Jake hurt Tom and broke his heart, but even after that point, Tom was still upfront with Jake and handled his emotions with maturity. While the All-Stars version of Tom simply can't or won't do that. All-Stars does address Tom's behavior by showing how sorry he feels in episode 19, and Miriam calls him out for it in episode 11, but none of that is good enough for me. I do not believe that this version of Tom is good for Jake, and because this is the version of Tom we're stuck with now, all of my interest in this relationship has died with him. And I say all of that knowing full well that Jake is lower on the tier list than Tom is. If you can believe it, there might actually be more that I could say on Tom, but I think by now I've made my points pretty clear. This is not my Tom. He looks like Tom, he sounds like Tom, but he lacks all of the nuance and characterization that made me like the original so much. And he is not even in the bottom 4 of this list. Buckle up.
I am literally neurodivergent and a minor. It would be problematic for you to criticize me.
Obviously, this entire video is subjective. These are all just my opinions, and you're bound to disagree with me somewhere, and I'm cool with that. Your opinions are just as valid as mine. But this is easily the most subjective placement in the video, and I'm willing to bet that the majority of people do not have this character as low as I do. If you predicted that this is where Gabby would place on the list, then I'm happy to inform you that you have predicted correctly. I hate her! Unlike Tom, who I had a laundry list of problems with, my dislike of Gabby is much easier to explain. I just think she's annoying. Gabby wasn't perfectly written in season 1, but I still really enjoyed her. She had a compelling storyline with Grett, a cute romance with Ellie, and a really goofy friendship with Dan. She had plenty of moments where she flew off the handle or did something erratic, but there was always a good reason behind those actions. In All Stars, she acts like a petulant child throwing tantrums whenever she doesn't get her way. They made an active effort to tell jokes with her, and I don't blame them for doing that. Gabby had some funny moments in season 1, and I cite her outburst with Grett as an example of that. But the jokes they try to tell with her in All Stars just don't hit. It feels like their philosophy was, oh, let's make Gabby say something silly and quirky, the Gen Z audience will love that, and it comes off as needlessly try-hard.
Can I write the song? Please, please, please! Have I such a pain and anguish in my soul to express for the music?
You are a mistake.
I think she said her funniest when later on to take her seriously. Example.
Vote together, no matter what.
And how do I know you guys won't vote me out like Ellie?
It wasn't personal, Gabby.
It's just part of the game.
How could you guys be so cold?
I'm sorry, but if Gabby ever starts a sentence with, "You vote me out," I can't take her seriously for the rest of the scene. It is too deep in my brain. Gabby doesn't have too much content early on, but she very quickly begins to spiral once Ellie starts nearing her elimination. Here's something that I like, actually. After it's revealed that Ellie is a part of the Villains Alliance, Gabby starts to worry about how much Ellie trusts her. After all, if Ellie hid her involvement from her girlfriend, what else would she be willing to do? That is interesting, actually, and if ONC capitalized on that, it could have led to an interesting storyline between the two of them. It could have given Ellie some much needed conflict to make their relationship even more engaging. But no, Gabby forgets all of that the moment Ellie gets eliminated and vows revenge on the Cyan team, joining the Villain Alliance to get rid of and I hate this plotline so much. How am I meant to respond to this? Should I be distraught that Gabby joined up with the villains? Shocked? Is this supposed to be a moment of karma for the heroes? Because they didn't do anything wrong. Ellie absolutely deserved to get voted out when she did. Am I meant to root against Gabby? Well, considering how she's the main person helping Grett in subsequent episodes, I kinda doubt that's it either. I can buy that she's upset, but when she herself recognized Ellie's shortcomings only to turn on everyone for how cruel and cold they were, I have a hard time taking her seriously. And while I like that she supported Grett throughout her relationship and how she promotes a nice message about how friends can help each other out of abusive situations, I still think she's the weakest part of this plotline. While I do like the parallels to season 1, I don't think their chemistry is all that interesting, and I think another character easily could have filled this role and probably would have done it better. I already mentioned Connor, but I feel like Jake also could have been a good choice. He knows what it's like to be taken advantage of in a relationship, and I think him going out of his way to help someone in that same situation would be a good way to show his character growth. Likewise, the show already made several comparisons between Allie and Grett, so I do think that pairing could have worked too. Allie was always very hard on herself, but I think seeing Grett in an objectively worse place could have led to an interesting story. We didn't need Gabby. I do not like her contributions to this storyline, and I do not like her elimination. Granted, not many of All Stars eliminations are all that good, but this one just feels overly sappy to me. And as one last aside, this is more of a personal decision since Gabby stans have given me a lot of grief in the past. As far as character fandoms go, I think some of Yule's fans are worse since apparently they think it's appropriate to roleplay as Republicans. You know exactly who you are. Stop fucking doing that. People on Twitter think I'm the reason you're like that. But Gabby is a close second because a lot of her fans start foaming at the mouth whenever people criticize her, which is exactly why I've taken up bullying her as a hobby. I will treat all of you with respect if you respect me in turn, but I am under no obligation to give that courtesy to a fictional character, and I feel like some of you forget that sometimes. She is annoying, I do not like her, and yet she's not even in the bottom 3. Lucky me.
Will Elisa member ever get a personality?
Excuse
I spoiled this quest. I'm sorry.
Bottom 4. Bottom 3. And look, it's the final 3 of the season. What a lovely coincidence. Having spent 21 long episodes with these 3 over a several month time period, I've had a lot of time to thoroughly dissect their characters. So I am fully ready to explain exactly what I hate about all 3 of them, and why I nearly lost faith in ONC's ability to tell a compelling narrative. I've saved the F tier exclusively for these 3. I really, truly hate them, and no amount of rewatching this season is ever going to change that. But the format of this video forces me to rank one of them higher than the other 2, so now I have to decide which one of them is the least bad. And I think that's Ellie. I am not going to make the claim that Season 2 Ellie was a good character who got derailed. In fact, I think referring to her as a character with a personality is a stretch. Now that being said, I like Season 2 Ellie more. Objectively speaking, Season 3 Ellie is better in literally every way. Her design is better, her voice acting is better, she has an actual plotline that doesn't revolve around Hunter, an improvement. I think that this is a better use of her character, and on every objective level, this is a massive improvement. But none of that changes how impossibly irritating I think she is. Like most DCast plotlines, I think the idea is solid. Using the real-life perception of Ellie's character to build her storyline in All-Stars is interesting, and for the first few episodes I was somewhat invested. But then, Hunter got eliminated, and she started talking to Jake, and any moment where these two share a screen together is a moment of the show that I spend in anguish. The main problem with Ellie is that her storyline focuses very heavily on repairing her reputation from Season 2. We get several scenes dedicated to showing how paranoid she is about her image and how these online trolls have affected her mentally. Her paranoia and self-image issues are present in the vast majority of her interactions, and that could definitely be a compelling narrative. These negative traits are a good challenge for Ellie to overcome, but the problem is that these traits make up the brunt of her personality. I don't feel like Ellie is going through a character arc. I feel like the character arc is going through Ellie, and yes, there is a difference. Why should I care about Ellie's struggles? I'm on board with the idea that harassing people online is bad, but that alone isn't enough to make me want to see Ellie succeed. This is where her nothing burger characterization in Season 2 really comes to bite her. I feel like they needed to spend more time re-establishing her as a character before jumping into this new storyline. Here's something I might do. Have Ellie start the season with a wildly different personality from Season 2. She could be over-enthusiastic or moody or a complete wildcard, some type of character that she thinks the audience might enjoy. Then, after the James boot, Hunter could confront her on this, and we get to see a look at her actual personality and how she's worried about being her authentic self on camera. I feel like that could have been a better way to reintroduce Ellie to the audience and then get them on board with her new plotline. But it also would have helped if she had, you know, an actual personality. Here's a fun experiment for you. Name me a single positive character trait that Ellie has. I'm willing to bet that most of you responded with, she's hot, and if you didn't, I know you were thinking it. Do not lie to me. What is her actual character even supposed to be? Because aside from her chronic need to be liked, the only personality trait she actually has comes in the form of unfunny gaming references. And if one of your most notable traits is being the girl who said gang gang, then have you really changed all that much from Season 2? Not only are Ellie's gaming references not funny, but they're also incredibly shallow. Like, yeah, she sure is using gaming terminology, but it feels so artificial. I remember growing up watching a lot of cartoons that tried to be hip and cool by referencing gaming culture, but it was so very obvious to me that a bunch of out-of-touch old dudes just Googled some references and then shoved them in the show without much effort. Ellie feels like that kind of character to me. You know what would be interesting actually? If she was faking the gamer girl angle the entire time in an attempt to appeal to a wider audience, and that's why people didn't like her, because they saw through the persona. Then maybe she could have gone into All-Stars with the goal of being more true to herself. It really isn't that hard to make this character work, but no, as soon as Hunter leaves, Ellie spends 90% of her screen time fighting with Jake, which really isn't a good look. But given how unpopular Jake was, I'm honestly certain that it did help her in some regard. But even then, the only episode where they actually talk to each other like real people is episode 20, which famously showcases Ellie getting angry at Jake for lying about how close he was to his grandmother. Despite admitting to Jake earlier in the episode that he was one of her favorite characters from Season 1, confirming that she did watch the season and saw Jake's phone call on TV. And still, for some reason, thought he was lying. Okay, even if he was somehow long-conning from season 1 like a 4D chess god, why would she get mad at Jake for that? Your grandma is homophobic? Never mind what that means for you. You lied to me! Who approved this scene? Oh my god. I could go into other facets of her character, like her dynamics with the other contestants, but why would I do that? There's nothing substantial there. In fact, there's nothing substantial about her entire character. She has no actual identity as a human being, and almost every relationship she has feels shallow and uninteresting. She peaked in the first few episodes of the season, and even then, that was only because she was in proximity to Hunter, and both of whom are way more enjoyable and way more interesting than Allie ever could be. I think Allie is an F-tier character because they straight up did not fix the problem from season 2. She went from being as deep as a puddle to as deep as a bathtub. She is objectively a more nuanced character, but all of that ironic charm from the original just gets replaced with paranoia with nothing to facilitate it. It's so ironic how she came into this season wanting to prove herself and earn the admiration of all the viewers back home, only to solidify herself as a bigger waste of a casting slot on this season than in season 2. I hate Rhea and Jake a lot more, but at least those two have concrete personalities and defined roles to play in the season. I don't like their roles and personalities, but it's something. You could swap Allie out for anyone who went before her, and while the end result might not always be better, I think it would at least be more interesting to talk about. There is a silver lining here, and it's that DC2's remake will likely fix a lot of the problems that stem from the original. I don't doubt that the end product will be much better, and I'll probably enjoy Allie a lot more. But even if she's written beautifully, I doubt there's anything the remake could do to actively change how I view her in All-Stars. She is the lamest character in the entire season, but somehow the best of the final 3, which does not bode well for me.
You had sex with
8 octillion armadillos,
and then the September 11th terrorist attacks.
Having to choose which of this season's final 2 is the more insufferable character is an absolutely Herculean feat. I imagined 2 different versions of the season, one without Rhea and one without Jake, and I thought about which of those seasons would be easier to sit through. And ultimately, I think it's the one with Jake. To this day, it baffles me that some people can watch this season and come out of it liking Jake.
But I gotta ask, guys, I don't understand why you like Jake in season 1 and hate him in season 3. And I especially have to ask for those who like hate this Jake to the point of hating the whole season, why? Like, can you say like a reason as to why without contradicting your love for Jake in season 1? Because I don't think you can.
Oh, is that a challenge I hear?
So, for the Jake fans that loved him in season 1 but hate him in season 3, why?
I am so glad you asked. Here is my complete unfiltered analysis on how All-Stars butchered Jake. So to start off, I will say that compared to Tom, Season 3 Jake more closely resembles his Season 1 counterpart, in the sense that I can believe that they are the same person and not a skinwalker wearing the flesh of a past contestant. But there are quite a few differences. Jake often gets stereotyped as an over-emotional drama queen with terrible communication skills, and I feel like for Season 1 that's not really a fair comparison. Jake is impulsive, naive, and quick to assume the worst in others. These are his defining character flaws, and most of the problems he runs into stem from them. But if you're dedicated enough to analyze all of his scenes like I am, you will find that Jake used to be cool. From the get-go, Jake was one of the most outgoing, friendly characters in the cast. He made an earnest effort to connect with Tom, who was very reserved and secretive, and Miriam, who was otherwise very grumpy and lonely. He could be witty, he could be playful, and he made an active effort to support his teammates and make friends. But he was also vulnerable and sensitive, as expected of someone who lost his grandmother midway through a reality TV show. His paranoia got the better of him in several cases, but in Season 1, I think I can forgive him for that. A lot of people point to his first outburst at Tom as a big point of contention. But like, this is Jake just now realizing that Tom flipped on Drew, lied about it, and also he's a spy. Given how paranoid we know Jake to be, I think he's justified in being a little bit upset. And yeah, he does push things a bit far, but they make it pretty clear in the following scenes that he had no idea that his words would get Tom fired. Are you really going to blame Jake for not knowing the intricacies of Tom's contract? And if your answer is yes, imagine if you were on a season competing with someone who you knew was a spy. A bunch of you would probably snitch immediately and get him in even more trouble. The second big point of contention is his other big argument with Tom in episode 10. And to a degree, I do think Jake is in the wrong for not seeking Tom out to disprove Ellie's claim. But on that note, A, exploiting your friend's trauma is not girl boss actually. Ellie is the main person at fault here, and this is why Miriam's fake heart attack was justified. And B, when Tom approaches Jake before the vote, Jake actually says, okay, yeah, I should hear you out on this, but he gets quickly ushered away before Tom can explain himself. Do these things fully exonerate Jake? No, at the end of the day, he still does vote for Tom, but I think these two details add a lot more nuance to his decision. If you take a lot of these moments in isolation, Jake does come off as very unreasonable and melodramatic, but watching the scenes that build to those big moments reveals several different facets to Jake's character, which I think makes him more likable and better explains why he does what he does. Unfortunately, because Jake's angry moments are easily his most popular scenes from season 1, I think a lot of people only focus on that and view Jake in a more negative light as a result. And I tell you, all of that because when you do boil Jake down to his outburst and his worst traits, you get the version of Jake that we see in DCAS. I'm not even sure where to start with this guy. Oh my lord. I could psychoanalyze every scene he's in bit by bit, but I think it would be easier if I went over his many character dynamics. So Jake and Aiden, right? Their rivalry is a big part of the pre-merge, and all of that stems from episode 2. Jake is under the impression that Aiden is stealing Tom, and when he brings this up to James, they fight and James gets eliminated. Unlike in season 1 where his paranoia actually had some basis in reality, the only reason why Jake starts worrying about Aiden and Tom is because Alec told him that he was being replaced. I'm sorry, Jake, wasn't your big takeaway from season 1 the idea that you shouldn't jump to conclusions based on what people tell you and seek out the truth for yourself? Maybe if Aiden was like playfully flirting with Tom, then I'd see it, but as is, I don't think Jake is bitter enough to suspect a guy in a relationship of foul play, especially since it's implied that Jake has seen season 2. As is though, his reasons for hating Aiden are flimsy as hell, and any scene they have together in episodes 2 through 10 make me mad. Watching these two bicker for 8 episodes is not enjoyable for me. Jake is portrayed as the bad guy in this situation, and he is, but he really shouldn't be. His motivations are incredibly stupid. The fact that he treats Aiden like the spawn of Satan over perceived slights that he made up in his own head is ungodly annoying, and by this point in the series, Jake should know better. Admittedly, I do like their scenes post-episode 12 during the brief portion of the season where the merge was good. But I don't think the frustration that came from the first 10 episodes was worth that. Aiden is basically relegated to being Jake's sidekick, and his elimination in episode 15 is essentially just a building block to further Jake's storyline. Which wouldn't be a problem if the 7th placer of the season had anything else going on for him and the episode actually focused on him, but who cares about that, right? Jake's got a new rival by this point, Allie, and if I gave the impression that Jake and Aiden's dynamic was mostly annoying, Jake and Allie are insufferable. I really wish I could articulate just how bad this plotline is, but like most things with Allie, there really isn't that much substance. So let's widen the scope a bit. When Disventure Camp was first getting popular, I remember a lot of people said that it was the mature version of Total Drama, as in more narratively and emotionally developed, better suited for older grown-up audiences.
Really? I muster up the courage to admit my wrongs, and that's how you answer?
Hey, actions speak louder than words. I won't believe you changed till I see it.
Well, you being a prick isn't any help.
What did you call me? All Jeff does is talk about himself and his problems.
Excuse me? You wouldn't shut up about Hunter when he got out, and you didn't see me complaining.
Don't you dare bring Hunter into this. He's not your business. Hang on, Jake. I'm not done.
Like you know what you're looking for.
Oh, and you do?
Stop hogging it.
Wait, I want to try a password.
Forget it.
Let go.
No, you let go. Ow! What's wrong with you?
You told me to let it go. I don't like it. Let's go again.
Allie, it's fine. You're in last.
We can catch up. This is gonna be shown to everyone. I don't wanna look silly.
That's it. You're impossible.
Jake!
I'm sorry, Allie, but you are the most insecure person I've ever met. And that's coming from me. I feel bad for Hunter having to deal with your bullshit.
Are you still on your first puzzle bag?
Did you just come to gloat?
Yeah. Hey! Ow! Out of my way!
Hey, if you're gonna be a dick, I'll make sure we both lose.
That's not fair. Crystal! You got this? Play hard, love Sean?
What? Who?
Wow.
But no, I...
You weren't close with your grandma. You were playing me for sympathy points. And to think, I felt seen for once.
Because you stole Dream Island from me!
I'm sorry, what about that was mature or meaningful? There was this one show about horses aimed at very young children, and it handled character conflict better than this. At least with Aiden, that rivalry had some significance to a larger plot and a reason to be in the story. What does this accomplish? If it's meant to be funny, then I regret to inform you that children fighting does not make me laugh. If it's meant to be dramatic, then I regret to inform you that children fighting does not get me invested in the narrative. And if it's meant to endear me to the characters, then... no! I've already talked about Allie, so I'll skip her. More importantly, Jacob Hamilton is 27 years of age. And yet here he is, taunting Allie like a schoolyard bully, pulling her hair and being a nuisance. The closest Jake ever got to this in season 1 was in episode 11, where he was ranting at Ellie. The difference is that Ellie very quickly shut that down, and Jake got eliminated later that episode. The idea is that Jake didn't recognize his own shortcomings, and as such, he couldn't win the season. Here though, instead of Jake facing any consequences for his behavior, he is constantly handed solutions from out of nowhere. Jake completely derails the Heroes Alliance at the merge? No worries, the villains just vote for Ashley anyway. Jake might be in danger at the final 7? Nah, let's give him immunity and get rid of Aiden. Jake and Allie are both up for elimination at the final 5? Here's an idea, let's have them come to a compromise to vote off Grett. That could be a nice way to put an end to their fight. Oh, they're immediately back to hating each other in episode 18? Sure, okay, how fun. On their own, none of these things are too terribly bad, but when you put them all together, you can't really ignore the fact that Jake spent the vast majority of the season being an entitled asshole and just didn't face any consequences. Which is made worse in the finale when he has so many people on his side advocating for how much he's changed.
Aw, come on, James. You watched what happened. Hasn't he grown?
How? Like, how did he grow? Oh, is it because he learned to stop being so paranoid and treat people better? Wasn't that supposed to be the lesson he learned after season 1?
Maybe he just needs more time.
It's been 19 mother-loving episodes, Ashley! How much longer does he need? James is the only person to see the situation for what it is, and that is a big reason why I put him at the top. He is too good for this season. Oh, hey Tom, why are you glaring at James so hard? Do you have something to add to the conversation?
I really do. I never stopped. He's so kind, and despite his anxieties, he really sees the best in people.
I'm sorry? All-Stars Jake sees the best in people. Thomas, are you on narcotics? This guy had a beef with Aiden because he smiled at you. He sparked up a season-long rivalry with Allie because she was spending just a little too much time with Ashley. This guy takes any perceived slight, no matter how small, as a deeply personal attack on his character, and treats nearly everyone with bitterness and aggression. You think this guy sees the best in everyone? No. No. I refuse to buy into the narrative that Jake became a better person over the course of this season. And clearly, I'm not the only one who thinks that way. For those of you who might be unaware, up until basically the last moment, Jake was going to win the season. He was going to win the $1 million, completing the hero's journey, big sunshine, happy ending, all roads lead back to Jake. But so many people like myself expressed disappointment with how Jake had been handled, and how he hadn't grown as a character like the narrative wanted us to believe, and ONC took notice. Because they knew he didn't earn it. They realized, like I did and like a lot of you did, that all Jake did this season was whine, cry, and yell at others, so they denied him the win. And there's a lot to be said about how invested ONC is in their own fandom, but that's not especially relevant right now, and honestly, I don't care. I was happy to see Jake lose. From a writing standpoint, this absolutely would have been the correct decision. It would have, if his final two opponent was literally anyone else in the cast. Oh yes, it's time to talk about her.
Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live.
Hi, Worsty, did you miss me? Here we are at the end of the list. You technically outlasted every other character and earned this top spot for yourself. But unlike in DCast, where you got away with everything, now you have to deal with me. My hatred of Rhea is very well documented. When I was reviewing All-Stars, I dedicated a lot of time to picking apart her character and thoroughly explaining everything wrong with her. This section of this video is what all of that has been leading up to. Even though Jake sometimes feels like the center of the universe and makes me want to rip my hair out, there are still a few glimmers of the character I liked in Season 1, and in a few select episodes I can honestly say that I like what he brings to the table. But Rhea came astoundingly close to ruining the entire season by herself, and here is why I think that. The concept is simple. After her second place finish in Season 2, Rhea's fanbase suddenly exploded, and she quickly skyrocketed into stardom for the mean girl persona she played on the show. And going into Season 3, she continues to play that character, but finds herself conflicted at every turn, torn between her morals and her fame. That idea is not even good on paper. The execution is awful, don't get me wrong, but the fundamental setup of this plotline does not work because they gave it to Rhea. Let's set the record straight real quick. Rhea's heel turn in Season 2, not good. You start to see the gears turning in episode 9, and in the very next episode, Rhea frames Rosa for stealing everyone's things and gets her eliminated. But not out of a sense of malice, more like, oh, other people are okay with doing bad things and justifying it as gameplay, so this is totally cool, right Rosa? We're still friends, right Rosa? I'm a good person, right? And then in episode 11, someone flipped a switch in her brain, and from then on, she acts like the Temu version of Heather. The setup is barely there, the personality change isn't believable, and villain Rhea isn't charming enough to fill the role. I cut ONC some slack because, again, cars are, but they tried to fit too much in too short a time frame and it did not work. So All-Stars presenting her as a breakout star with a ton of fans is very dubious because at the time she absolutely did not. The IRL Disventure Camp community was generally very neutral about her. She showed up around the lower middle of most people's tier lists, but that's less to do with anything she did and more so because Season 2 also had Crystal, Maggie, Carol, Nina, Marcus, Allie, Hunter, Oliver, Rosa, and Yule, all of whom were divisive for their own reasons. Up until her heel turn, Rhea was the Dan of the cast, and actually, considering Dan was robbed and should have won the show, he was probably more popular than her for a while. So I'm assuming that DCast is implying that the in-universe audience of Disventure Camp really resonated with her and fell in love with her character. The same in-universe audience that relentlessly harassed Grett for her behavior and her weight, bullied Ashley for being boring, and canceled James because he was using Aiden at the start of the season. This audience fell in love with the woman who left Aiden to dangle over a cliff to potentially break his bones and or die. Very consistent. So before the season has even officially started, Rhea's story is inconsistent and messy, but don't worry everyone, it does get worse. The first few episodes aren't terrible for her. She's constantly flaunting her evil queen persona, which I find to be completely intolerable, but she's on a team with Connor and they do have some nice scenes together. These two had a genuinely interesting relationship in Season 2, and for a little while it looked like All-Stars was going to expand upon that relationship in an interesting way. But then Episode 6 happens. I already mentioned this earlier in the video, but I think this would have been the perfect time to get rid of her. Yule and Rhea were arguing all season, and that hatred reached a fever pitch in this episode. For a guy like Yule, who's so easily willing to turn on people who annoy him, it would make perfect sense for him to say, "Screw the alliance, I'm voting Rhea," and then Grett would join him because, obviously. And then Alec, who spent so long trying to get this alliance together, has to deal with the fallout and the frustration of all of his plans falling apart. Connor could then take advantage of the opportunity that Miriam gave to him and buddy up to Alec, convincing him to vote for Rhea. Why would Connor do this, you ask? Well, by this point, Connor would recognize that the competition is only making Rhea into a worse person, and in his mind the only way to get her to stop would be to vote her off. Alec, having no other options, agrees. Rhea is initially very angry at this, but she and Connor have a heartfelt moment at the bus stop. He tells her that he loves her for who she is and not who the cameras want her to be. Rhea thanks him, they hug, and she leaves the game vowing to be more true to herself. I came up with this idea as they were singing, and I think it would have been a great way to end Rhea's story while giving every other member of the yellow team a narrative push. Connor especially. But no, instead the Villains Alliance sticks together and votes off Connor, and yeah, it makes sense logically, but I don't care, this is lame. It's boring and it actively hinders Alec's character, because he went from having a fairly enjoyable dynamic with Connor to a very bland dynamic with Rhea where he's basically just her side piece. When a character like Connor, who had a lot of potential to offer the season, is eliminated over Rhea, who had no potential to offer the season, I have a problem. And that's a big reason why I do not like the eliminations this season. Because there is not a single character after Connor that I can look at and say to myself, yeah, I'm glad that this person got eliminated over Rhea. I don't like to throw around the term plot armor very often because I feel like a lot of people don't fully understand the meaning of the term, and this fandom in particular really tends to overuse it. But if any character in this show did have plot armor, it would be Rhea. If the show you're watching can provide a reasonable, sensible explanation for why a character is able to survive a dangerous situation, then the character does not have plot armor. If it can't, then they might. And there are multiple points in DCAS where Rhea survives in the game through pure bullshit. The Connor boot gets a pass because as much as I dislike it, there is a solid explanation for it. Elimination is definitely eyebrow raising. I don't like that Gabby flipped on the Cyan team, and I think her reasons are stupid, but this is Gabby we're talking about, so sure. Aiden's elimination isn't much better. Allie flipping to the villains because how could anyone like Jake more than me is very annoying and definitely sudden, but hating on Jake is one of the few consistent personality traits she actually has, so there's an argument for this one too. I wanted Rhea eliminated in all of these instances, but each one of them has an explanation for why she survived, even if I find those explanations somewhat questionable. But episode 16 was the one. Final 6. Grett has immunity. Nobody in the game likes Rhea. Alec is a tenuous ally at best, and everyone else is coming off of episode 15, where Aiden made his disdain for Rhea very clear. Connor can finally vote her off. Jake can get his revenge for Aiden. Grett can stake her claim by taking out the biggest villain of the season, and hell, Alec could even flip on her as a sign of his character development. All of that would have led to an incredibly satisfying elimination, where the biggest villain falls and the final 5 turns into an arms race for allies and immunity. Staggeringly though, they can't even get that right, because for some reason, the likes of which I cannot fathom, they decide to vote Alec instead. Why would you want to do this? Oh, Grett wants to vote off Alec for personal reasons? Well, last I checked, she wasn't the biggest fan of Rhea either. Oh, she wants to keep the temperamental duos in the game? Oh wow, Grett, that's so smart of you. I really hope that works out for you. Everything in episodes 15 and 16 was building up to Alec and Connor getting revenge on Rhea. Do you have any idea how satisfying it would be if after all of the mistreatment Rhea put Connor through, he's ultimately the one to take her out with an idol play? That could have been incredible, but no, they vote off Alec instead, because even though none of these people want Rhea to stick around, the writers do, and it doesn't feel natural to me. Am I being overcritical of these eliminations? Maybe, but here's the thing, I could easily excuse this type of writing if the end result was enjoyable. Let me quickly use Total Drama as an example of what I mean. Take the string of episodes where Izzy, Cody, and Beth all get eliminated back to back. Logically speaking, Heather probably should have gone out in one of these. Granted, these 3 characters all have very valid reasons to be voted off. But I feel like Gwen and Lashana probably would have overlooked at least one of these instances in order to get rid of Heather, with Trent and Owen probably following close behind. The cooking episode is easily the best example of this. Heather is at her absolute worst here, abusing Owen, annoying Lashana to the point where she tried to beat her up, and annoying everyone else to the point where even Lindsay took part in locking her in the freezer. But I'm still fine with Heather surviving the elimination because I like her, and I think having her make it farther in the season makes the story better. But Rhea is not Heather. I don't even know who Rhea is because the narrative cannot decide. A problem I had while the season was going on is that I couldn't figure out what kind of character Rhea was supposed to be and how I was supposed to view her. but as of now, I do. Rhea is meant to be a tragic character. Her desire for fame and admiration clouded her judgment, and that caused her to fully succumb to the villain persona. And by the time the season was over, that was the only way people viewed her, leaving her isolated and alone. The idea is that you understand why she ended up this way and that she probably deserved it, but you feel bad that she lost her way and ended up like this. Here's why this doesn't work. Rhea's most dedicated fans, aka Jared and the proofreaders, often bring up the dichotomy between Rhea the mean girl and Rhea the actual person. How they're supposed to be different and how the complexity between these sides of Rhea make her a more nuanced character. Trouble is, 95% of the time she's on screen, Rhea is in villain mode. Villain Rhea is not enjoyable or even tolerable in most instances, so I don't like it when she's on screen. The only time we get a look at the true Rhea is A, when she's drunk with Alec, and by that point she's been so cartoonishly evil for so long I genuinely do not believe what she says here, and B, these very sad faces she makes when she does something wrong. And that's just not good enough to offset evil Rhea. In order to make this plot work, I feel the screen time should have been closer to 50-50. At least that way we'd be able to attach ourselves to the true Rhea and root for her to not turn out like villain Rhea. But we never see the true Rhea. The evil Rhea is the only character we get, and I think she's obnoxious and insufferable. She knowingly does bad things, and I'm supposed to view her as complex because she feels bad about doing them? I'm sorry, ma'am, you nearly paralyzed a man and almost killed multiple people. You do not have my sympathy. BoJack Horseman might be a stupid piece of shit, but he made an active effort to try and be a good person even if he wasn't good at it. And even at his worst, he's still got Will Arnett's tremendous acting to fall back on. Rhea is not comparable to BoJack Horseman. Do not let episode 17 tell you otherwise. And despite all of that, despite how cruel she is, how much physical harm she's done to other people, despite how much the narrative paints her as the main villain of the season that we should root against, does she at least get karma for her actions? Well, yes, actually. You see, it starts with her winning the season. No! Apparently, this victory is justified because Rhea worked so hard and went through so much to get there, and that is the biggest crock of shit this show has ever tried to sell me on. The worst thing that ever happens to Rhea in her entire life, from my perspective, is that she struggled to find acting roles in Bollywood. A conflict that happens off-screen prior to both seasons that she competed on. Nothing bad actually happens to Rhea throughout the season, unless you want to count not being in the majority vote as one of her big struggles. Some people spout the narrative that Rhea won because she wanted to win the most and that she put forth the most effort to earn it. And to those people, I would like to ask, did you not see Grett go through an entire training arc where she overcame merciless harassment from people online and her own boyfriend, where she learned to love herself and take responsibility for her own happiness? Yul is just as bad a person as Rhea is, and he got punched, kicked, slammed against walls, run over, and burned. Rhea never even came close to stubbing her toe. I'm not asking for anyone to kirk the bitch, but she needed some kind of karma. Where was her bald moment? Where was her surprise blindside? Where was her fang? If nothing else, at least, and you will never hear me say this again, at least Mal, for as edgy and poorly written as he is, inarguably got his comeuppance when Mike pressed the reset button and fucking killed him. The only type of punishment that Rhea got is that by the end of the season, no one wants to associate with her. Everyone, even Connor, got tired of her nonsense and left her to herself. But even that doesn't hold water, because she's still rich, still has a career according to DC4, and her sister still wants to be a part of her life. She is the total drama equivalent of Jared Leto. But I know that not everyone agrees with this. I've heard the argument that this ending is good and well written because it teaches everyone a lesson about how sometimes bad people just get away with things and how the ending is realistic because of that. And for any of those people who might be watching, I just gotta ask, do you really want this show to be that way? Do you really want Disventure Camp to be a show where the villains win and the heroes are doomed to argue with each other until the end of time? I understand wanting to watch a show with messy drama, but I feel like in pursuit of that drama, Disventure Camp All-Stars missed something that is crucial to any show in this format. As bad as DC2 started, there was a genuine sense of connection between James and Aiden that inspired James to become a better person and win the show for both of them. Season 1 wasn't perfect, but the bonds between Jake and Miriam, Jake and Tom, Gabby and Ellie, and Fiore and Alec created a real sense of community between these characters and made me want to root for all of them. And while the problems with DC4 are fairly well documented by this point, despite all of that, this cast is willing to have fun, make connections with one another, and they genuinely seem to like each other. At the heart of all these seasons is something positive, but at the heart of Disventure Camp All-Stars is nothing. I go into each season of Disventure Camp hoping to be fulfilled by the narrative, and by the end of it, reach some sort of catharsis. And despite their flaws, seasons 1 and 2 were able to accomplish that. And unless something goes catastrophically wrong in the finale, I think season 4 will as well. All-Stars is the only season of the show that left me feeling this unsatisfied, which sucks because it didn't have to be that way. Rewatching the show, I found a lot of new things that I liked and characters I appreciated a lot more. The pieces were absolutely here to create the best fan-made TD project to date, but they just never came together in a way that I liked. And maybe that's just me. I know a lot of people really like this season, and I'm happy if you do. I don't want people to hate this season, or ONC as a company, because as much as I dislike All-Stars, I think I'm really good at talking about it. And clearly a lot of you agree, since the videos where I do talk about it really helped grow my channel. Obviously, that chapter of my channel is behind me now. And while I can't definitively say that I'll never return to Tipiska because YouTube is a cruel beast and I may need to appease the algorithm if things don't work out, I feel like this video allowed me to lay out all of my thoughts regarding this cast, and judging by the length of the script, I clearly had a lot. When I do revisit All-Stars or any of the seasons that came before it, I think it'll be in the form of a rewrite. And honestly, I might give Total Drama that same treatment as well. There's a lot of talented creators who do that type of content, so let me know if you'd want to see me give it a shot. But for now, this video is probably the most thorough deep dive anyone has given to this cast, and I really hope it pays off because this is going to be a nightmare to edit. It's not a season that I enjoy, but I respect any product that keeps this fandom going. And obviously, everyone who worked on it really gave it their all to make this season the best it could be, and I will always admire passion like that. So let that be the takeaway as I wrap up this video. You know, it's weird. As I was writing this script, I had a feeling that I was forgetting something, but coming up on 64 pages now, I can't for the life of me figure out what that might be.
Yo.
Oh, hey there, Keith Yeti. Did you have a fun time doing the transitions?
They're tasted like sandpaper, but anyway, you skipped someone.
Oh, goodness gracious, I figured something like this. Okay, who was it?
I don't know, but you only put her at number 2.
Okay, that's definitely not correct, but I could have sworn I had all of them. Who am I forgetting?
Go down the list.
Okay, James, Grett, Yule, Connor, Hunter, Ellie, Fiore, Aiden, Lake and Miriam together, Emily, Ashley, Alec, the host plot, Tom, Gabby, Jake, Allie, and Rhea. Who am I? Oh my god, I forgot.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system.
Hunter's page
Is not available. At the tone, please record your...